I used to think that people who didn't drink were boring, that their lives must be dull. How could you have fun without alcohol in your life? But it turns out it was a false belief, and it was one of many false beliefs that I had about alcohol. Thankfully, I've been alcohol free now for nearly 4 years, and in this video I want to share with you 7 powerful reasons to never drink alcohol again. The first reason was huge for me. When I was drinking, my anxiety was out of control, but I believed alcohol was actually easing my anxiety. I'd drink every single night, and for a few fleeting moments, alcohol did ease my anxiety. But after I'd finished drinking, my anxiety would be back out of control again. In fact, it would be worse than it was before. And as the years went by, it was getting worse and worse and worse. I would say by the time I stopped drinking, my anxiety was probably 8 or 9 out of 10. Yet a few months after I stopped drinking, it was down to 2 or 3 out of 10. My anxiety levels returned back to normal. The reality is that alcohol is the fuel on the fire of anxiety, and it is one of the biggest reasons that people stay stuck. They think alcohol's helping their anxiety when in fact it's making it worse. Alcohol is sneaky, and it will play tricks on you, and it will cause you to have false beliefs about what it's doing and how it's impacting your life. Start paying attention to the reality. Yes, in that short period while you're drinking, alcohol might hit the pause button on your anxiety, but over time I almost guarantee your anxiety has got worse. So take some time to really look at that closely. Another good reason to never drink alcohol again is that it ruins relationships. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that everybody who drinks ends up getting divorced, but slowly, over time, alcohol can cause an emotional disconnect, a communication breakdown between partners that can just cause things not to be as good as they might have once been. The more time we're spending thinking about alcohol, drinking alcohol, fantasizing about alcohol, the less often we're emotionally available for our partner. And alcohol can cause us to lie and to be sneaky around our partners too, which leads to dishonesty, hiding things, covering things up, not telling the truth all the time. And worst of all, a lot of people who drink regularly or heavily feel a sense of shame about their behavior. They tend to shut down. They find it hard to be vulnerable and to communicate to their partner about exactly what's going on in their own experience. Again, this leads to a gulf in the relationship, and it can feel a bit like the Grand Canyon after time, with you on one side and your partner on the other, wondering how you can ever reunite and reconnect and communicate again like you once did. Now, alcohol can affect relationships in many, many different ways, but for many, it shows up as a communication breakdown, emotional shutdown, and a kind of disconnect that happens over a period of time. Of course, relationships take work, and I'm not blaming alcohol for every single relationship breakdown, but it absolutely contributes. Without alcohol, I've seen hundreds and hundreds of people reconnect, start communicating, become vulnerable with their partner, and start to kind of feel like they've fallen back in love again. Removing alcohol can revive relationships that have been flagging, and often the reason they were flagging is at least in part down to one or both of the partner's drinking behaviour. And not only does alcohol destroy relationships, it can also destroy careers. Have you ever phoned in sick with a hangover after a heavy night's drinking? Well, of course, doing that now and again probably isn't going to get you fired or necessarily ruin your career. It may well do. But over time, alcohol takes away our motivation, our hunger, our desire to succeed, and our thirst to really enjoy things and enjoy what we love. And hopefully you love or at least enjoy your career. Alcohol can suck that away. We can end up becoming resentful, not even wanting to go into work. And while we're at work, we can spend a lot of time thinking about when we're going to buy booze, what time we're going to start drinking, how much we're going to have. Our mental bandwidth can be so clogged up with thoughts about alcohol, there's no room for anything else. We end up underperforming at work. We don't seem to be fully present. When we remove alcohol, we're there. We're in the moment. We become fully present. And many people start performing better than they've ever performed. Maybe you can spend a few moments considering whether alcohol has affected your performance in the workplace. It may not necessarily destroy your career, but over time, many people find that they're not performing at the levels they once did. Another great reason never to drink alcohol again is it makes us a worse parent. I experienced this personally, as I did with everything I'm sharing on this list for you. As I mentioned, when our mind is occupied with thoughts about drinking, wondering what time we can start, wondering how much we can have, we don't have time for other things, and that includes our kids. You might find that when it's story time, when you're putting your kids to bed and you're reading them a story, you end up feeling a sense of resentment because you just want to get downstairs and make a start on your wine. And it might show up in other ways. You might feel embarrassed drinking wine when your children are around, so you become annoyed. You become passive aggressive or resentful because you just want them out of the room so you can get on with your drinking. You may never have thought about that. You may never have considered it. Of course, when I speak it out loud, it sounds kind of selfish, but it's a reality. Many people do this. When you remove alcohol, you take it off the table. It's not even a thing. And I have heard hundreds of people tell me how as soon as they've taken alcohol out of their life, they've been fully present for their kids. They've started to enjoy a much more meaningful relationship with them. They start smiling. They start enjoying themselves. And here's the thing, our kids notice, even young kids, they make comments about our drinking, sometimes just as a joke, but they notice it and they worry about it. As soon as you remove alcohol out of the way, not only does it teach our kids a lesson without actually telling them anything, they see it, they witness it, and they learn from it. It also allows you to truly reconnect with them and to truly be there for them. They're not worrying any longer about which version of you they're going to get. If you've watched the video I did with my son, where he talked about what I was like as a father when I was drinking compared to what I was like as a father after I quit, he talks about me being like a Jekyll and Hyde character. He never knew which version of me he was going to get. Now it's one version. He always gets the same version. And I know that he feels a whole lot more safer because of that decision not to drink again. Now, alcohol's a depressant. That doesn't necessarily mean it makes you depressed, although alcohol has been linked to causing depression and anxiety. What it means is that it slows down the function in our brain, so messages can't transmit as quickly as they're supposed to. When the messages in our brain are slowed down, our functioning is slowed down as well. So alcohol can make us kind of dumb, especially when we've been drinking or when we're feeling hungover. We're not as sharp as we normally are. We're not as alert. We're not as attentive. We're not as aware, because if we've been drinking, alcohol has slowed all our functioning down. You've no doubt seen people who are very drunk, and obviously they have lost complete control of their cognitive functioning. And when people are in that state, they can do all sorts of things that they regret, things that cause them physical or emotional harm. It can be really dangerous. But equally, the day after drinking, we're also not performing at our best. Here's the thing, alcohol can send us on a roller coaster ride. After the first drink, we feel kind of euphoric. Because we feel so euphoric and so much above our baseline of happiness, alcohol releases a chemical called dynorphin to bring us back down. Our brain wants to keep us at a state of homeostasis, which is baseline happiness at all times. So if we're way too high above it, it will do something to bring us back down again. When it releases dynorphin, it brings us below our baseline of happiness. So we actually feel sad and lower than before we started drinking. So we have another drink, we go back up again, but not quite so high this time. Then our brain releases more dynorphin and we come back down again. We enter this roller coaster of ups and downs, happy highs and sad lows. and end up chasing those happy highs. Over time, alcohol can chip away at our baseline of happiness, and we can end up feeling permanently below it, even when we're not drinking. So alcohol can make us show up in the world as a 50% version of ourselves, even when we're not drinking. One of the biggest things for me and many of the people that I work with is discovering that when we're drinking, we tend to show up as false versions of ourselves in the world. We can have the version of us that we show to the world for social events. We might show that version to our friends, the version that we show to our family, the version that we show to our work colleagues. And we have masks that we wear for when we're drinking. But when we stop drinking, we start to really understand who we are, what we like, what lights us up and brings us joy, and what we don't like, and the areas of our lives where we need to set boundaries. Life becomes much more simple. We become able to say no. We become able to speak our truth. But all the while we're drinking, we never get to find out who we really are. We never get to fully understand ourselves. Again, our mental bandwidth is so full of thoughts about drinking, thoughts about our behaviour. We're full of regrets, remorse, fantasizing about booze, that we never stop to think about our emotional well-being, to think about who we really are, what we really need, what our emotional state looks like, because we distract ourselves with thoughts about drinking. Whenever I would have a negative thought in the days when I was drinking, instead of looking closer at it and turning towards it, I would turn in the opposite direction and think about wine and what time I could start drinking. I used it as a distraction to avoid any sort of emotional discomfort. When you stop drinking, you don't have that option any longer. It forces you to look closer at who you are. And sure, that can be uncomfortable, particularly at the start. But once you work out who you really are, you can cultivate your life. You can shape it to something that you really love, that brings you true joy, complete peace, and total happiness. I mentioned anxiety at the start. There's a video next to me now that talks about anxiety, alcohol, and depression. I think you'll find it really interesting. If you click on it now, you can watch it straight away. Don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. There's a button on the screen. If you click that now, you can subscribe right away and you'll never miss another video. And I'll see you again on the next video very soon.